Welcome back for another installment of Fellowship of the Rink. Episode 36 is brought to you by our incredible local friends in Waggle Golf, 9 Mile Brewing, and the officially unofficial craft beer of the Minnesota Wild, Barrel Theory Beer Co. With me, as always, Joe Smith of The Athletic, bringing you all the insider info on your Minnesota Wild and Gophers hockey. Joe, we just wrapped quite the chaotic game here. I'd say we're all in good spirits.
Yeah, like it's I think, the start that they had, the Wild had, where like having trailed the first 5 or so games, you're like, it's great and it's surprising and everything else. And then like, let's see, they play one of the best teams in the league and they go into the defending, cup champions building and beat them pretty bad and chase Bobrovsky. I know it's early season, it's October, like, this is not a playoff game, but this was I think it was a measuring stick win. I don't know if you feel this way. I think it was a pretty big kind of point to the league of like, hey, like this is a great start and not just fluff here. It's something that can be, because the starts have killed them the last 2-3 years. So to have this kind of a run, no matter who it's against or what happens, like this has got to be a huge catapult to what John Hines is trying to build here in his first full season.
I think you nailed it right there. Like it's not a playoff game, quote unquote, but for the Minnesota Wild, if you look at recent seasons, the start of the season is what kills them. And they have looked the part. Like, granted, should they maybe have had a couple of wins out of overtime wins? Like, sure, whatever. But we're nitpicking there. Like, this team has looked really good. And they've done it without players at times. And I think right now is Spurgeon the only one that we're still Spurgeon and Hartman. But like they're looking the part. They belong. And granted, Florida was missing some guys tonight too, but I did not expect this kind of a performance. And it definitely shifts the mindset a little bit, right? Like, we're not going to go knee jerk, but I feel a lot more confident than I did before the season started.
Well, it's amazing what good goaltending will do for you too, right? Like all of a sudden, like, and Filip Gustavsson's the story of the season for me. Give him a lot of credit for being in the trade wins in the draft area, time, and then summertime, and then had to take him off, right? This is a guy who's got a lot of pride and showed he could be a really good goalie a couple of years ago, and he's come in and said 3 goalie rotation. What, the Wild know that they need to win, and so they're going to play the goalie that gives them the best chance. And Fleury's going to get his starts, of course, but if Gustavsson's playing this way, he's going to get the lion's share of the starts. So, and with the Wallstedt later on in this podcast, but I think that's really what gives them. I think what happened last year, they were a little more of a fragile team, and they felt like they would get behind, or something bad would happen, and all of a sudden it would snowball on them. And they've been a more resilient team in years past than they were last year. But I think what makes you a more resilient team is having a belief in your goaltender and having your goaltenders give you the saves that you shouldn't make, right? Or just save your ass when you need to. And I think that will give a team all of a sudden a little more resilience and toughness and everything else. Like, hey, this guy's got our back and we can mess up and this will happen. And Gus is back there. So that's been, I think, in the wins that they've had, obviously he's got 4 wins. So he's been the guy in the pipes for him. So that's the foundation, but everything else, Marco Rossi, again, a great game tonight. He's been playing number 1 center. Hartman's been a little banged up too. So Rossi's started off like he's hoped to off of last year. You're seeing Jake Middleton coming off of his large extension he got in the offseason. I think 3 points tonight or 3. Yeah. He's been playing well. And this is all without mostly Jared Spurgeon for a good part of the first start of the season because of his injuries, and they're giving him some maintenance. And like Bill Guerin told the media that he's kind of just dealing with some recovery from his hip and back surgery from last year. So he's been skating back in St. Paul. So they're hoping he can join him at the end of the road trip. But all this to say is that, as you could have thought the start could be, this is probably as good as it could have imagined, right? Like, they were going to go 6-0 or whatever, but they've never haven't trailed in 6 games. And now they play Tampa Bay on Thursday. You go in and win in that building, and all of a sudden you're feeling a lot really, really good about yourself.
Yeah, and I'm not gonna lie, Jake Middleton tonight, he was one of the post-game interviews. He did not have the band on, and losing the mustache like gave me a minor concussion. Like that, I can't process it. It doesn't make sense. Him and Hartman, I can't do without facial hair. It messes me up every time.
No, and especially Middleton. Like Hartman, you see him back and forth, whatever like that. Middleton, I don't know if it's a dad thing. His wife Natalie is due any minute now, and so congrats to Jake and Natalie when that happens, because it's going to be crazy for him, as we know. But yeah, like I just love the way he's been coming to the season. I love the fact that the penalty kill has been so much better. I think Jake Middleton called it junkyard dog mentality or whatever like that, or just getting after it. But they clearly have a different look to them, the different feel to it, and that'll just give them so much confidence. It's like, even if those penalty kill, it's like a special teams unit, there's still confidence they've been gained and lost in that group, even though they don't all play together every single shift. They do different combos on forwards and defensemen. To have a good start for them is going to be such a huge thing going forward.
For sure. And I mean, you mentioned it already. Next game up here, Thursday night, Tampa Bay Lightning. Most people probably aren't aware of this, but you're uniquely qualified to talk about this team. Early returns say maybe fans aren't so mad at GM Julien BriseBois anymore.
Well, I mean, that's a loaded question. I mean, I covered Stamkos for how many 100 years, but that presence is going to be felt and lost for a long time. But Jake Gensel with Braden Point and Kucherov has been unbelievable. That's like a video game line. And, Kucherov's off to an MVP caliber start. Gensel's been a great fit for them. No one's going to replace the one-timer on the power play. No one's going to replace a presence in the room or basically the franchise, what he built in Stamkos. But the Lightning were in that position where they've lost a couple of first-round series in a row. And for them, it's a huge deal, right, where they came from. So they need to make some sort of changes in 5-on-5. And, Jake Gensel is the official, unofficial, one of us in Minnesota from his time and his dad's time. So he's been off to a terrific start, and it'll be another measuring stick moment, I think, for the Wild to see if they can go in there and win. And I just know Russo's excited to be in Tampa, a rare Tampa trip for him, although it's bittersweet because he'll be in Tampa and I'll be seeing one of his favorite bands, Trampled by Turtles, on Thursday night.
Be honest, Joe. Are you only going to see Trampled by Turtles to stick it to Russo while he's out enjoying your Tampa trip?
I will not be trolling. I actually kind of feel bad I told him that I was going, because I just think that he asked me before, like, we come up with paternity leave just to go to cover this game. And like, there's one trip I would come up paternity leave to go to, would be Tampa trip. Right. So yeah, it's a sticky subject there, but he's been 1,000 Trampled shows. Like, he's almost part of the band. Like, he's seen it. This is my first time seeing them, and then Abbott Brothers, obviously the main act on Thursday at the X. So I'll be there for that one. But yeah, it's a role reversal, and I think part of my contract when I joined the Athletic Minnesota is to do all the Tampa and Florida trips. So this is the one-off this year because of the baby. So hopefully he enjoys his time down the waterfront in Tampa, and it's a good game. But I'll be at the X on Thursday and enjoying that show.
There you go. And are we worried about Marc-Andre Fleury being the starter there? Not even because like Marc-Andre Fleury is the concern. The guy hasn't seen a lot of rubber so far this year, and this is going to be a test. Like tonight during the Frozen Frenzy, which is still, I think, a little bit of a work in progress, but at least ESPN's trying. They just routed the New Jersey Devils 8-5, and that's a statement win in my mind. Like, I think Devils are going to pace the East, and I was worried coming into the season about Tampa. Clearly, I was wrong. So, what do you think, though? Like, what's the mindset going into this game for Fleury and the guys that got to play in front of him? Because, like you said, Gustavsson has made things a lot easier on the team.
He has, and you can't play him every game, right? And if you're going to use 2 goals, I mean, Fleury's going to start in Pittsburgh, right, next week. That's going to be part of the plan. This is last year. He's going to play there. So you have to give him one game in 2 weeks before he plays there. So this just feels right. And, Fleury's a competitor. I mean, it's going to be a heck of a challenge against Tampa, but he lives for these kind of moments. And the team's been playing really well, and he's got a lot of – so you can't play Gus every game as much as you want to, probably, if you're riding the hot hand. But if you're going to end up playing both goaltenders, you need to have other guy fresh and another guy in rhythm. And so with 5 games in 16 days, you can't just sit him the whole time. So it'll bring me to the other point later on with Wallstedt, what to do with him. But you got to play Fleury at one of these games. And I guess you could have put in Gus next game and then play, but they didn't want to play Fleury back-to-back games either. So
no, and I'm not even challenging that he's playing. It's more so like already to your point of he's got to play before Pittsburgh. It's like how long has it actually been on a calendar since Fleury played? It's been over a week.
Yeah, and it's happened last year with him too. And I mean, he had a stretch second half of the year when there was injuries where he played a lot. But the goalie coach, Fred Chabot, told me, Fleury is sometimes better when he doesn't play all the time, like he let a workload. So, but yeah, he'll be ready to roll. The team's on a good roll right now. So I think he'll probably feel the mojo of that and knowing not want to break the streak here probably for them of no regulation losses yet. But it'll give them power play chances in Tampa, no matter if Save Ghost is there or not. It's going to be a long night. So I think that would be the key for me, watching the game from afar.
That is very fair. Now, being our shtick here with the name of the podcast, we absolutely are mandated to discuss the legendary costume donned by one Jakub Lauko for Halloween this year. Oh my Lord.
That was incredible. Do you have a flash on our screen of that? Do you show people the viewers, the photo?
I'll add the overlay once I go into editing. It'll be there.
We're looking forward to having him on our pod because I think our whole pod will be a digression into every single part of the movie or the books. I know he's read the books and know he's followed it all the way through, and his tattoos speak to that. But the whole Halloween in NHL has been legendary overall, not just the Wild, but every team. But I think the Wild brought their A game this year from the photos that I saw. See Jared Spurgeon. Ellie,
Jared Spurgeon's was very good. I'm personally, if we remove the bias with, of course, how amazing Lauko's was, I don't know how you don't give the win to Ryan Hartman.
Yeah.
Impressive. The I like turtles. Although the picture I saw, I don't know if his shirt said I like turtles or if that was just a caption someone put over it. If he put I like turtles on the shirt, I'm docking points from him because it's way better if people only get it if they get it, kind of thing. You know what I mean? But don't spell it out. Joke. Yeah. Even Fleury having the McLovin driver's license was a little borderline, but I'm okay with it because it plays because he made it the actual driver's license, and that kind of plays with part of the slapstick humor in the movie. But I like when it's a good costume, but there's going to be some people that don't get it, and you just kind of laugh at them.
Yeah, I even love Danny Spurgeon's wife with the no regrets from We Are the Millers. That was pretty good.
That's really good.
You have any regrets? No, not at all.
Not even a single letter?
No one. Speaking of no regrets, what is your worst Halloween costume you ever had growing up?
Mine?
Yes.
Oh boy. The worst one I've ever had. Honestly, the worst ones for me were when I just mailed it in and I'd grab a Scream mask or something. But the one that I definitely abused and overdid, I'm telling you, when I was a kid, I thought I was going to be a ninja when I grew up. I'm not talking when I was in middle school. I'm talking little kid, elementary school, whatever. But any variation of ninja or Ninja Turtle, you bet your ass that I did that at some point. The coolest one was when we were really little. I had to have been 3 or 4. Me and my brother were both dressed up as Batman and Robin, and my parents actually turned our red wagon into the Batmobile, fully decked it out. That's the one that I'll hold on to as like, okay, we nailed this one. Outside that, I haven't had any overly spectacular Halloweens. But what's yours? What's the one that you are haunted by?
No, well, speaking of Ninja Turtles, I was a Ninja Turtle only at an adult Halloween party when I was like in my mid-20s, and I brought pizza with me, which was great.
Oh, that's awesome. That
the
rocks.
whole green get up and everything. I felt
Which
better
turtle?
about that one. My mom was big into making costumes, like
Sure.
sewing them up. So I was like Garfield once. I was, me, my sister and I were Mickey and Minnie once. My sister was born 2 years younger than me, so she was born the same day, 2 years apart. So the one I'm most embarrassed about, and I'm gonna get shit for this one. For some reason, my parents or my mom made me into like a bum or somebody who was homeless, whatever. So I had like the whole like cigar. I don't know what I was dressed up as, but I don't know why they had me looking like this. I was either like a shepherd or I don't know what was going on, but like I didn't no idea when I was like 10 what I was wearing. But
interesting. Okay.
So that was probably the one I'm most embarrassed about. But like I can be Garfield every day, all day long. I was like obviously a sports player at some point wearing a jersey. Every guy was like a sports, like a football player at some point. I was Jerry Rice at one point. But my mom, my mom always used to like make our costumes for us when we were really really little, which is cool. We're curious about what Connor will be, or I don't know what Logan will be for this Halloween. Did Logan have a costume yet?
We were having that discussion tonight, and we're probably gonna have to place an order on something with Amazon here quick. I don't know. I have like too many ideas is part of the problem. And granted, with a kid, it's like what's gonna be the least elaborate and easiest to do while still looking like it's not just mailing it in,
Mm-hmm.
And will he keep it on? Like there was one we looked at that my wife thought was pretty funny, where it's like a dwarf outfit, but like Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah.
And I'm very worried about what's going to happen with the beard.
Okay.
That's a concern of like, oh, is he going to rip that thing off? Is he going to try and eat it? Like, these are the things you got to think about.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's a bunch of them that are just like a onesie zip up thing where like it's some kind of animal or a dinosaur or something. So we're still very much in the evaluation phase. I think the best question though is like if you're an NHL player, Joe, and you've got just like F off money and you're going all out, what's the costume you're going to concoct?
If I all out, man, that's a good one. I would think that in my endless amounts of resources, I would have to come to some sort of. I'd have to do like a Lord of the Rings, like
Sauron, just to one up Lauko.
Yeah. I would have to do with the ball. Yeah, I would have to have it all. I don't want to scare my kid, but I would have to do that. But yeah, I think you have to do something so intricate where you have the costume plus the paint everywhere. You have to have some sort of thing going on.
I'll give credit though. Jesse Puljarvi out in Edmonton a couple of years ago, like no makeup or anything crazy like that, but he nailed it. Him and his girlfriend. He was the little girl that like shakes the bag at the dentist office. And then the girlfriend was like the fish in the bag that he was holding. And he like nailed it. It looked so perfect. We were talking about it Monday though on live stream for Judd's Buds. And have you seen the movie Role Models?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
One of our like shared favorite movies between Spoke Z and I. And I would want to get 3 other people to come together with me and do Kiss My Anthea. So the 4 guys all dress up as members of Kiss, but then also are like decked out in like battle gear for this. What is it called? Like LARP? Yeah.
Oh yeah, that was such
live action role play, I think. Yeah. So like if I could get 3 other people on board with me for that, that would be my move, I think.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's a little more fun when you have kids, right? And or it's fun when you're a kid, and then fun when you're in like maybe college age, and then you take a break from it, where it being cool, and then all of a sudden it gets when you have kids that where it'll be a lot of fun. So
Totally. 9 Mile Brewing, located in the land of local legend Mark Parrish. That's right, none other than Bloomington is proud to be the newest partner of Fellowship of the Rink. Stop on by the tap room for some fresh, local craft beer, NA beverages, and a variety of snacks. Seasonal beers do rotate frequently just to keep their offerings new and exciting, with games available for all ages, and that includes contests, different tournaments. I know Crokinole is a big one right now. They have cribbage tournaments, and of course, euchre for the sickos out here in the Midwest like myself. Um, but on top of that, I can tell you firsthand, they encourage everyone to bring out their inner nerddom with staff and regular patrons alike. Producer Isha and myself were out there recently and recorded some really fun content with their head brewer, John, only to happen across a collection of Lord of the Rings replica swords. If you want to see where things went from there, be sure to check out the full video on our YouTube channel. Just go and search The Soda Pod. It's the Flight series, and it was a lot of fun. Cheers to the state of hockey. And again, friends, go check out our newest partner here, 9 Mile Brewing, out in Bloomington.
I don't know how we segue into anything else from here. But yeah, we were talking about the Wild for a bit. So I will get back to talking hockey here since we segued from way far from there. Jesper Wallstedt. I want to talk about him a little bit because obviously he's a huge part of the future, the number one goalie for this team coming forward. Had a rough weekend. His first starts for Iowa since getting sent down. He can play with Milwaukee this week, I believe, in action. But I don't think there's a concern over him. I think they're just hard to go from being on the roster to being sent back and then kind of. I mean, they told him to have a place in Minnesota, like this is your spot. And then now all of a sudden with the roster construction and the injuries, he has to go back. But with the way Gustavsson is playing, there's not a huge need to have the rotation the way it is. And I'm of the belief that a guy like that needs to play. No matter where that is, the pro level, he needs to play because it'll only prepare him better in the future for where he's going to be. And they don't do a lot of practices at the NHL level, especially with the Minnesota Wild, is my point, because they don't. The one argument for him being the NHL level is he can practice more against the guys. They don't practice a lot on road trips and whatever. So, but I don't think I'm worried about Wallstedt at this point. I think it's more so of circumstances and Gustavsson playing well, the team playing well, and like they'll get him his starts. Just give him some time in Iowa the first few weeks and let him play. Yeah,
and I think if anything, I don't think any of the fans are worried because he wasn't playing in Minnesota. I think there's some fans that are freaking out because of him getting absolutely shelled by, I believe it was San Jose's farm team, which I'm sorry, like early looks. And obviously we got a great interview coming for you guys here shortly with Matt Hendricks. And we definitely recorded that interview before that game. Very bad look for the team for anyone not named Hunter Haight and Mikey Milne. But we're going to see. Like, we got to give it a couple of weeks here. Obviously, it's early to judge, but hopefully we don't deal with another year of having a young roster in Iowa that leads to difficult nights for goalies, because Wallstedt definitely could have played a better game. He could have had a lot of help in front of him too. So
yeah,
I'm with you though. Like, I'm not even remotely worried about Wallstedt. I just hope he gets games, stays hot, and eventually something's going to come to fruition where he's going to get an opportunity in Minnesota, or there's always injury risk. I'm not worried about him though. He's going to be fine.
Yeah, it's probably the hardest thing mentally for a guy like that, where you probably feel like you belong in the NHL and you should be there. There's not a spot for you, and so now you're kind of in this limbo where you feel like you proved yourself in the NHL level or AHL level, and now you have to go back there. Like Ben Guru, who was a coach for Syracuse Lightning, was have to say you have to land back in the AHL and kind of plant yourself there before you can actually get back, if you get sent down mentally, to get back into it and go back to the NHL level. You have to kind of land there and arrive and be like, okay, this is where I'm at. I need to refocus. I need to be able to put my work in and give my best foot forward before I get back. And it's always that mental, you drop a little bit because you feel like you're supposed to be in the NHL, and have to go back and play. But clearly, obviously, he's not playing for the Minnesota Wild now. The roster in front of him, the roster in front of Gustavsson's been playing really well NHL level. But so a lot of goalie stats are skewed by what happens in front of them. So that's not why we're harping on Wallstedt for that. It's more so this circumstances of going from practicing and playing with them and all of a sudden going back to the Iowa and seeing how that goes is going to be a big change.
It is. And as long as they manage it right, again, I'm not too concerned, but if he's going up and down 35 regularly, that's not going to be awesome for him. So we'll see.
Yeah.
I think go ahead.
Who's been the biggest surprise for you the Wild season? Who's been the biggest non-Gustavsson surprise for you?
I mean, I was going to say, it's not even surprise. I think that the two guys that, like, it's awesome that they did well are Gustavsson and Rossi, because they're the two guys that were talked about most this summer for trades. The one for me, though, that stood out, and maybe this is a little recency bias with tonight because he was buzzing out there, but Zuccarello looks like he's 25 years old again. Him and Kirill are doing the thing. I loved that they rocked the Kaprizov was a third wheel for the costume there in Halloween, of course, not a shock, but that first line of Rossi, Kaprizov, Zuccarello is clicking at most points.
And you have that, plus you have the Eck and Boldy, right? So you get more balance on your lines. And I think once the Foligno Trenton line starts to come together, and then they don't need to produce offensively a ton, but they once they become more effective, then you make more of a deeper team. So I agree with you on that. Like, you only never heard of Faber this year because he's been so solid, right? You don't think but Middleton playing well, especially without Spurgeon, has been a big thing, I think, for the Wild so far this season. Getting some more depth defensively there.
He has been great. And to your point on Faber, him and Brodin, the less I hear about both of them, the more happy I am that they're clearly doing their jobs, because they shouldn't be talked about.
Yeah. No, it's like a great offensive lineman. You don't hear about them until there is a sack happening. And so no one needs to push for Faber for any awards right now. So let him play and do his thing. And then, for them, the Wild, they hope that Spurgeon's back soon and can play a big chunk of minutes and keep it rolling. But yeah, and Johansson scored today too. Johansson scored tonight. And so I think they were giving him a lot of a boost since the summertime to say, hey, like, this wasn't part of his career, wasn't him playing like that last year wasn't his MO for his career. And so I think they gave him some grace there, and he wanted to work hard over the summer and get back to where the things that made him successful. And you can see that at the beginning of the part of the season. So he's given a leash in that role, and you might as well see what he can do. So Johansson contributing in that fashion makes it so you have to make harder decisions of playing a rookie or playing a young guy in that position, right? Like Ogren.
Yeah, and I mean, if he's playing well, no question, keep him there. He is one of the bigger, like, X factor question marks for the season. Like, if he can play decent, just decent, consistently, that second line is a huge boost. If you can have two lines that you can score with, that's a big difference maker that obviously we didn't see last year. But the other guy I think that needs to get a little bit of notice, and I'm not saying that he's been like a world beater, but I haven't seen any reason for people to complain about John Merrill. And that was definitely a concern for me going into the season. Him getting slotted in once Spurgeon came out, I think he's played fine. And if he can continue to do so, you could do a lot worse for your seventh defenseman.
Seventh or sixth, right? Right now. Yeah. And I think that happened late last year too. I think, which is why I think Goligoski sat a lot in his last season. Because Merrill is one of those guys that fans like to hate on, which there are times where he has some frustrating moments, but there are also times where he, doesn't blow you away, but he plays solid and you don't notice him, and he just plays in his own end and everything. So he's So yeah, like I think having him and Damon Hunt, a guy who can be called up and play when you need somebody to spot in, gives them a lot of comfort knowing they have some depth there.
He's another one like Wallstedt, though, where like he's sitting there like, I should be in the NHL, and I think he should be. And obviously, that's a lot tougher hill to climb. Although I guess more likely that injuries occur there. But I would love to see him get a little bit more runway with the big club. I just know that's not really going to happen if they keep on winning like this, right?
Yeah, they won't. And like they've already got guys that are signed, right? It's harder to break in over guys like the Bogosians, even Chisholm, who was re-signed. Like they're just not a lot of places there. So I would want Hunt to be playing a lot more than he would be playing at the NHL level, barring injury. So, but the last year or so has been terrific for him. He's taken a huge step. I think a lot of ownership in his game and getting faster and quicker with decision making in the corners and all that stuff. So that's a positive sign for Wild fans wanting their D prospects to accelerate.
For sure. I don't know. I get the vibe here, Joe, just from how things have gone so far. Fans are getting excited. They're like a little cautiously optimistic and like, okay, I don't want to get too excited too fast. This feels like a spot where they're going to go in and they're going to beat Tampa, but then they're going to like just derail against Philly and Pittsburgh, two teams that they should absolutely beat. I don't know, that would like be the perfect like balancing of like, okay, fans, let's just like give it a little bit more time and figure out where this team actually sits.
Yeah, like I would also love to hear a Minnesota market if the Wild were like 8-0-2, right? Like I also love to hear the radio. Like I remember last year when the T-Wolves were up 2-0 against the Nuggets or something like that, and like they're like already rigging on matchups against the Celtics in the final. And who's in guard Tate? Who's in guard this? I'm like, seriously? Like you haven't won a pro sports title since like a male men's pro sports title. Sorry, I know the Lynx have won several championships. They haven't won a
get into that later
since '91.
Yeah.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves here, kids.
No, but that's why, Joe. You're used to winning. Okay. You came from Tampa. Winning was a normal thing across several sports. Here, the second you see even a glimmer of a chance that you're going to go a little further, you're going ahead. Like you're not planning the parade. You're thinking like, okay, where is all the different like Stanley Cup parties going to be held? Like they have to take that moment to dream and think out because it's not something that typically happens in Minnesota that you have a chance to think about a championship.
Well, and I don't know if you saw it. There was a great ESPN article with Edwards and
Jefferson,
and they recreated the Randy Moss photo with Kevin Garnett from like 20 years ago, right? Or how many years ago it was? Like these are two of the best players in the world in their sports in Minnesota, right? And they've signed and committed to Minnesota to bring them a championship. Like this has got to be like obviously the Wild have a ways to go to, maybe Kirill resigns next summer, whatever becomes that pillar. But like that's such a cool thing, I think, for a city to revolve around, like two of these pinnacle athletes coming here, staying here, be drafted here, and all of a sudden being like, hey, this is a place I want to bring a title to. So I think for all the hurt that Minnesota fans have had for how many years it's been, to have those kind of two kind of beacons there, and having Kirill Kaprizov, who one of the best players in the world, in my opinion, here, and if he signs again, that'll be an interesting thing. You don't have that in most cities, right? Three guys of that stature in the league all together, sign long term of that stature.
That would be pretty awesome. We can only wait until July 1st.
Yeah. Nothing's fine. Yeah.
We have to. But all right. I think with that, Joe, let's kick it over to a great interview that we banked here for you guys with GM now of the Iowa Wild, Matt Hendricks. This interview is brought to you by our friends at Waggle Golf. Waggle Golf believes what you wear on the course should reflect your individuality, who you are, where you're from, your hobbies, interests, and passions. All the stuff that makes you, Well, you. That's why every design is inspired by the desire to create a piece of apparel that strikes a chord when you see it. That makes you say, wow, that was made for me. Because in a lot of ways, it was. Ready to get your waggle on? Go to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 at checkout to take 10% off your entire order. Joining the show today is one of us by way of Blaine, Minnesota, spending 4 seasons with the local St. Cloud State Huskies, who rivals another former Husky, Mark Parrish, in the NHL suitcase category with a lengthy hockey DB page, playing part of his final season with the Minnesota Wild, which, I don't know, somehow you managed to parlay into 5 years in the Wild's front office, leading player development, and kicking off now your first season as GM of the Iowa Wild, Matt Hendricks. Appreciate you jumping on.
Absolutely, Scott. Thanks for the fine introduction.
We try. Some of them are a lot shorter. I don't have nearly as much I can dig up.
It was a lot of stops along the road for sure. Without a doubt, I can't argue with you there.
So have you and Parrish ever gotten into a suitcase off? Like,
no, I don't think we have, but definitely have talked about our careers together and, you know, how much love we have for our fellow Husker, for the big Huskies just north of the city. So absolutely do talk about that.
And they're an interesting spot, but are they ever not in it? Are they ever not competitive?
Well, Coach Larson up there, Brett Larson, he's done a great job his last number of years, and they just seem to keep finding their way in the door, and they're competitive, and a lot of good young players again, and excited to see what this year is gonna look like for them.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Oh, early one that we ask everybody because it's a little bit more obscure, bit of a Rorschach test. What is the Minnesota Wild logo?
Wow, I believe it's a bear. I think I have it right here, don't I?
Yeah.
Face of a bear, right?
Yeah.
With the wilderness in the background.
Yeah.
There you go.
Is anyone going to argue it?
We've heard some very interesting responses. We've heard bear, cougar. We've had some people say that they didn't know there was an animal.
Yeah, definitely a bear.
One said a UFO. One of your prospects
a UFO. Come on.
Take a guess which former Iowa Wild player said UFO.
Adam Beckman?
Yeah.
It was.
That's
awesome that you actually could guess it.
Yeah, I miss Beckman. He's a character for sure.
Great kid.
Yes, he is.
As you probably seen, Fellowship of the Rink is the name of our podcast, a stick tap to one of our favorites, Lord of the Rings. We asked everybody to, what's your nerd itch? Are you a Lord of the Rings person? Are you like a Harry Potter person? Are you like a big movie or book series kind of? Is there something you kind of dig deep into when you're not driving the highway down from Minneapolis to, like, there's got to be some sort of podcast or like some sort of book series you listen to on the way?
I listen to some sports stuff, true crime, kind of my geeky. I would say it's got to be around fishing lures. I mean, I've got some fishing lures that there's not a chance it would ever catch a fish. I don't know why I have them in my tackle box, but I just seem to collect them. You know, my son Gunner, who also is an avid fisherman, makes a lot of fun because he doesn't understand why I carry all this stuff around.
So is that something where you like are looking around, like scouring the internet for these, or is it more like, oh, I went somewhere and I came across this crazy lure, so I had to buy it?
Yeah, well, it's usually when I find a different technique. I get into drop shot, for example, and now I'm buying all the crazy, plastic baits that I can use for that. Or if I'm going to go top water, or I'm going to get into musky fishing, and then I kind of crawl down the rabbit hole with that stuff on the internet, and I get a box delivered to the house and it doesn't get used. My wife's not overly happy with that, and I'm running out of spots to store this stuff.
They're not that big, at least. So not like you're collecting some classic cars. You have to.
Yeah, that's a good point, Joe. Yeah, they're not. And someday I believe I can hand them down, right? They'll still be in pretty good shape.
No, yeah. Especially if you don't use them, like you don't. So
yes, exactly. Quit rubbing that in.
Yeah. So we're going to talk a ton today about, your work in player development, what we're looking at with the Iowa Wild this year. But before we do, you played with a very young Alex Ovechkin. You played with a very young Connor McDavid. Talk about just compare and contrast these young stallions coming into the league.
Oh, yeah. The comparable is just how gifted they both are and incredible hockey players. Ovi was more of the free spirit, energy, tons of energy, a lot of excitement, just like a kid in the candy store every day he came to the rink. And probably, arguably, is going to be the most pure goal scorer the NHL's ever seen. So it was a great 3 years playing with him and watching him do the things that he can do. And then I was really blessed again to be able to play with Connor in Edmonton. And the thing that jumped out at me right away with him was just his habits for an 18-year-old kid, the way that he conducted himself at the rink, away from the rink, the way that he showed up every day for practice, and the way that his compete level every single day. You knew he wants to be, or wanted at that time to be, the best. I think people argue who is the best right now, but he was something truly amazing to watch on a daily basis.
Well, people watch the Amazon show. I don't know if you've seen any of the episodes yet.
I haven't watched it yet, but I do plan on it for sure.
They probably show the clips of McDavid and how emotional he was in the finals and getting up in the middle locker room and pouring his heart out, obviously crying after Game 7, which most guys probably would. I feel like he's been on as a target or as a superstar since he was 14 years old, right? He's been in the spotlight for so long. People don't really get to know those guys very well. Would that surprise you to see kind of the motion of a guy like that, or knowing what kind of, because I think at the beginning he probably was still trying to find his way into being that superstar, but now I feel like he's kind of been kind of a superstar for a long time, and now people can humanize this guy, see what he's like.
Right. Well, I don't think it surprises me. This game, it's an emotional game. Regardless if you're the number one forward on a team or the 13th forward on a team, it's an emotional game. And to get to that point, I could only imagine, how much you've put into it. And knowing Connor and his work ethic, and there's nothing he wants more than to win the Stanley Cup. I know that for a fact. He's been saying it since he walked in the doors in Edmonton when he was 18. This is a dream of his, a passion of his. And I don't think you become the player that he is without that type of emotion, without that type of hunger to be the best.
Yeah. And looking at those two guys, I know you obviously haven't played with him, but you've seen a lot of up close and personal with Kirill Kaprizov. Throw him into the mix now. How does he stack up with some of those kind of players?
Right. Well, you know what? It's kind of funny that you say that. That's the first thing that jumped out to me when Kirill got here day one, was his practice habits. And if my memory serves me correct, it was I think it was still just captain's practice were going on at the Nutria practice facility. And they were working on some 2-on-2, 3-on-3 drills down low below the tops of the circles. And yeah, your eyes quickly jump on him because he has the puck the whole time. But when he's also out there with any other NHL players that are going to be able to defend him and take the puck from him. But what jumped off the page that specific day was, if he lost the puck, there was nobody on the ice that was working harder to get it back. And that for me is exactly what I'm talking about when I'm trying to describe Connor and his practice habits, is that usually when your best players are your drivers every day on the ice, it's contagious. And your team, the rest of the team, even though they are very good players, they play in the National Hockey League, there's a reason the best are the best. And Kirill has those same traits that I saw in Connor.
And in your position, you work with some of the elite top prospects, and you work with a lot of the guys who are just trying to make it, right? The guys are trying to fight and grind it. And I found it interesting. You met up at Tom Reed's like early in the summertime, talking about kind of your journey and getting there and how it maybe helps you in your job. And I was curious if you can kind of reflect on that time. Like you said, it was a turning point for you where you were AHL guy, you're kind of fighting, and I think you were trying to contemplate going to Europe, I believe at the time. And obviously you played in the NHL for a number of years after that, but how would you kind of describe that moment for you as a player? Maybe kind of how you think about that maybe at all when you work with some of these kids. And
yeah, I do think about that. The number one thing I learned through my playing career probably was patience. You look at I've got a 12-year-old son at home, and you try teaching him patience. It's not very easy, right? Same with he's got a twin sister. It's the same thing. Patience is hard. It's hard to learn unless you're forced to learn it. And I think once I got to that, would have been 25, and I thought I was a good American Hockey League player, but I wasn't getting a chance to go to play in the NHL. So, obviously teams from Europe were calling, and good money was on the table to go over there, a lot more than I was making or had the chance of making in the American League. So I was thinking about doing it. And my wife, Kim, says, well, did you ever dream of playing in Europe? And I said, no. Why would I dream of playing in Europe? And she said, well, why would we go? So that's a great story for any young player is you don't need to be in a rush. You got to have habits, and you got to work, and you got to bide your time. And, there's not many players in the league that I call it the 1% of the 1%. The players that don't play in the American League or don't play in the minors, they just go right to the NHL and never understand what the bus is like in the American Hockey League or any of that type of stuff. So, but again, that's 1% of the 1%. Most of us bide our time in the American League, and we need to. Some of us need to physically mature. Most of us mentally, emotionally mature. And, there's no fast forward on that development process. Each guy's different.
I mean, how much do you share that story with the guys you work with? Like, I don't know if that's something you if you often share stuff about yourself with these guys, or are you at that point where you?
I give them, I do fall back on some of my experiences. I try to not, because I want to make it about them.
Yeah.
I want to make it about their journey that they're currently on, and to not look, a mile down the road, 20 miles down the road. It's let's look at tomorrow. Mm-hmm. We had a good day today. Let's make tomorrow good. Or we had a bad day today. Mm-hmm. And let's look forward to tomorrow and how we're going to improve it. So I do fall, like I said, I do take some of my experiences, some of my stories, because players generally like to hear those, as long as they're good ones and they're not boring. When I get into my 50s, they might not be as fun anymore.
When I played,
right.
advisors and stuff.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, like speaking of patience, like I think a guy people were excited about in camp or Riley Heidt, and we talked to you about him a while. It's hard to rush a teenager going to NHL. I think people were hopeful, and I know Bill Guerin told us that he was going to get every chance to make the NHL if he proves it in camp. And clearly the talent's there, the skill set's there, but there's a difference between being a teenager and be ready for the NHL. And I was curious what you saw from him, obviously this past year, but in camp, and like, what are some things you think he could take away from this experience to where, hey, maybe even as a guy who's been on the straight arrow all the way up right now, there's going to have to be kind of a little evil plateau before you kind of go back up again.
Right. Well, I think in a year he had a better camp again this year than he did last year, and he had a pretty darn good camp a year ago. So for me, again, it's the maturation process. It's the bigger, stronger, faster player, and he's taking steps in that direction. But when a player eventually makes it to the NHL, they kick the door down. Mm-hmm. And they say, hey, I'm here to stay. And the manager knows it. The coaches know it. The team knows it. The players on the team know it. And he's just not there yet. And that's fine. He's going to continue to get better. What I love about him since I met him, since we drafted him, is his hunger and the chip on his shoulder. And, You know, he's not the tallest player out there by any means, but he's got a huge heart. So he's going to make it in the National Hockey League based on those things.
Do you think there should be any kind of exceptions made for, you know, the restriction where he can't play in the AHL this year? Or do you think that, like, blanket, that is a good rule?
Yeah, that's a tough one. I can speak, you know, my personal feelings is I think he put up, 136 points last year in the Western League. So what's a good year for him? You know, if he goes and puts 136 points up again this year, are we going to say, well, that's not good enough? That's crazy, right? I mean, 136 points is incredible. So I do, but I also understand the business side of it, you know, for the Canadian Junior Hockey League. Like this is a player that they have put a ton of energy into, a lot of resources into. He's played in Prince George now for a long time. They want him there. The fans want him there. They want to watch him play. So I get that side of it. Selfishly for me, I would love to see him take a little bit more of a step in terms of the league that he's playing in. But that's the world we live in, and we're gonna be perfectly happy with that. His confidence isn't going to go down this year, gentlemen. I promise.
I don't think it
Which is always good.
Speaking of confidence up, probably is another guy who's probably one of the more scrutinized prospects in your system is Charlie Stramel, and off to a great start, it seems like, at Michigan State. And you could probably speak to this as a player of, or maybe a change of scenery can do wonders for you, or a guy who coaches you, knows you well, trusts you is a big difference. But what was your latest, you know, kind of the last 6 months or so like working with him in your development side, and where do you think this change to State might be kind of a turning point for him? Because I think he's never going to be.
It's been a great start. I think the word start is big. What did he? I think it was third star of the week in the Big Ten. First, I think Charlie put a lot of work in this summer. Worked extremely hard, focused on all areas of his game where he wanted to improve. So he did change scenery, but he's, through his work and his play leading up to the start of their season, he opened a door for himself. He gave himself more opportunity by being ready and showing the coaches at Michigan State that he is ready to play, and he is ready for a bigger opportunity, you know, being further up the lineup. So he earned that on his own, and then he goes in there and he starts producing. And when I said start earlier, that's what I mean. It's so important to have a good start, especially in college hockey, when you play 2 games and you're off for a week. You play 2 games and you're off for a week, and then you have a bye week, and then Christmas break comes. And so it's nice to have that feeling of a little bit of success to start out the college year, for sure. And, you know, Charlie's he can bring a lot to the table in terms of a hockey player, in terms of his size. He can play in the middle, can play on the wing. And again, I don't want to keep going back to size, but man, that really matters in our sport.
I was wondering, in your dual role, where you guys been a development guy, but now you're the GM of the Iowa Wild, and you have a player like Jesper Wallstedt, who is the unquestioned #1 goalie of the future in the organization, and the team wants him to play more NHL minutes or get more NHL practices. Yet, on your own other hat as Iowa Wild GM, like, he's could be a key piece of what you have building there, right? And winning every day, and winning is important in development as well. What's the balance there for you, and what you see, what's important for him, the best way for him to get to be the NHL regular player, you know, getting NHL practices and stuff and floating around, versus maybe playing 55 games in Iowa, even though he probably doesn't want to play that many games in Iowa. Like, what's, I guess, the tricky situation of being what's best for him in this?
Yeah, it is tricky. I guess for me first, so I'm aiding our development staff any way I can, obviously still working with our Iowa coaches, which is a lot of development. So that is kind of my role now. In terms of Jesper, obviously he wants to be playing games at the National Hockey League level, and he will. So with my management hat on, of course, I love him playing for the Iowa Wild, right? I mean, I would be crazy if I'd be lying to you if I said no. But our belief, our system with Iowa is that we are there to develop players. We're there to teach players to win. You know, developing's hard at the American League level, winning's hard at the American League level, but we're trying to combine both, which is much more difficult for sure. But with that system, we believe that is the best way to help build prospects that can go up to St. Paul and help win a Stanley Cup. So if Jesper's going up and down 35 this year multiple times to help, you know, get him the amount of games that our goaltending staff, coaching staff, management staff believe he needs, then he's going to have to do that. And he's going to love every minute of it because it means he's going somewhere to play. So I think that's important for a young guy. He wants to be in the net. He wants to own the net. And he's a competitive kid too. Mm-hmm. So getting him out there and letting him play in that environment, whether it's in Minnesota or it's in Iowa, is really important for him.
And you said it, right? Like Iowa's there to develop these kids, but it's also like teaching them to win and starting that winning culture from the grassroots. It's no secret to anyone listening to the show that, you know, last year did not go the way anyone would have hoped.
Right.
Getting down there and making your first start here, leading the Iowa group, like what was the biggest focus in trying to rebound and change a little bit of that going into this season?
You mean in terms of winning and losing? Yeah. Well, last year was a tough year, and we're not in the excuse making business, right? So I won't go into that. But it is what happens up here does affect what happens in St. Paul, affects what happens in Iowa. What happens in Iowa affects what happens in Coralville with the Heartlanders. So tough years for all of us, and there's a number of reasons why. Looking at Iowa now, this year we did make some roster changes compared to last season. We feel we got a little bit more experienced, a little bit bigger, stronger, faster. We definitely got a little bit older as well. But having those pieces now in place in Iowa will give the big club proper depth. Guys that can play in the American Hockey League, be point producers in the American Hockey League, be leaders in the American Hockey League, can teach our young guys how to take care of themselves, how to practice, how to show up at the rink every single day. But those exact same players can go up to St. Paul and they can fill a role. They can kill penalties. They can win faceoffs. They can play north-south hard hockey the way John Hines wants. So those are some things that when you look at, when you're standing up and you're looking down on top of the big Wild and the Iowa Wild, understand that those players are there for a big reason. If I think that answers your question.
Well, I think you're talking about too, like veteran guys like the Reese Johnsons and, you know, Travis Boyds and like those. I think maybe what was missing last year, some of those veteran guys you thought would be down in Iowa or end up being in Minnesota, right?
Correct.
Connor Murmis and those guys. So where you kind of had a vacuum there, but it feels like those guys might be there, assuming injuries aren't crazy this year, more of a stability thing for your group, and that maybe might have been what missing last year too.
Absolutely. And yeah, we can go through those veteran players right now. For those reasons that you just mentioned and I mentioned before. Reese Johnson, Brennan Gauntz, Travis Boyd, Devin Shore, Ben Jones. I mean, these guys are real solid forwards. And then on the back end, we bring in Cam Crotty, Joseph Ciccone, good on the back end. I think when you brought up Murmis, what he play 1, 2, 3 games, we named him captain and he was gone for the rest of the year. You know, I think when you and I talked earlier, we talked a lot about our defensemen, 20-year-olds drinking out of a fire hose. Yeah. And there wasn't much insulating those young players. So, you know, now they're a year older. You know, they've taken a bit more of a step, but we've also got some really good, solid veteran players around them. And I say veterans like they're 35 years old. They're definitely not that old, but guys with more experience for sure that have played in this league for a while.
like obviously a lot of older guys there, but there's also some prospects I think that people were interested in just from watching in preseason. Like a Caden Bank here, for example, for me, was a guy that, came back from injury pretty quickly last year, considering what the injury was, at least in my opinion. And I think he had a pretty good camp too. Like, how close is he into being a player at this level?
Well, you're right. He's a heck of a prospect for us. Very tall kid, a lot of length, plays the center position. Again, we're talking about size in the middle, which is very valuable for a hockey club. Had a great summer in terms of his strength and conditioning, where the year before, I mean, there's not much he could do in the gym or on a bike or he couldn't do anything on the ice. So this was a valuable summer for him. He came in, he had a really good camp, played well. I think what we're all looking for with Banksy is the consistency, the day-to-day practice habits, the day-to-day game performances. Where with 5 being the best, he may have not had a 5 tonight, but he's constantly a 3, 3.5, if that makes sense. You're not looking for him to go out and score you 2-3 goals every single night. It'd be great if he did, but you're looking for those consistencies that a big, strong, shutdown centerman can have. He's going to get opportunity to score goals, and he's a power play guy down there. But you want to find those habits that a player needs to continue to push himself for NHL time.
Yeah, and the guy that I got to ask about, because I feel like he doesn't really get a whole lot of talk, like, from the fan base. And granted, like, missed some time last year, I get it. But talk about a guy like Mikey Mellon.
Oh, yeah. Well, another guy who had a great summer. Unfortunately got dinged up right at the beginning of prospects camp. So he missed that. He missed main camp. He got clearance down in Iowa, and I'll tell you, he's been shot out of a cannon, since he got back on the ice with the group there. It's been a lot of fun watching him. He's been extremely hungry, and he is a player that, again, the consistency stuff, and you're going to hear this word a lot from development guys, development coaches, is finding those habits where a coach feels 100% confident at all times putting you out there. He knows you're going to face the right way when you put the brakes on in the D zone. He knows you're not going to cheat in areas for offense. You're going to play the game the way the structure, the way the coaches have put things together, and you're going to execute a game plan. And he's continuing to work on that. But you're exactly right. He is going to continue to get better on the penalty kill as well. Could be an area where he could help an NHL hockey club.
Joe, we lost you.
I got you back.
A couple more questions before I let you go. One last one for me on players. Damon Hunt, the guy who played recently here. I felt he was one of those guys that was maybe in between AHL and NHL last year. He showed he could play in the NHL level in a game. You'd probably feel comfortable with him. And then, obviously he's your number one defenseman in Iowa, but really felt like they were impressed with him in camp and like this season where he could be a regular guy in the NHL level. Like, what step did he take to where all of a sudden he's a guy that they can say, hey, if you guys had only a bunch of guys banged up, this guy could play for you every night.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad this is kind of a great one to end on after going through the last couple, because he's a step further than those other players. He's has spent, a year longer in the American Hockey League, and he's finding that confidence where his practice habits are detailed and dialed in, his in-game habits. A coach looks down the bench, and you could put him out in any situation. You could put him out to run our number one power play. He can first guy over the boards on the penalty kill. You're down by a goal, you pull the goalie, he's going on the ice. Same thing. We're up by a goal, they pull their goalie, he's going on the ice. He can do everything right now, and he does it very well for us at the American Hockey League level. He's knocking on the door. He's going to push it or kick it down here eventually and earn himself NHL ice. Which I thought he played pretty darn good last night against St. Louis. Yeah, absolutely. Which is great to see, because that's what makes good organizations good, strong, is that the competitiveness, that players pushing players.
Definitely. Our last question then, Matt, comes from our good friends at Waggle Golf. Ask you as a little teaser before it, though, where was the golf game at this summer?
That's your hat too, isn't it? That loon. I've seen that thing around.
This was the Waggle Golf here stuff. Yeah.
Is it too?
Yeah.
I love that stuff. My golf game. So I'm just going to bring you back a few years ago 12 years ago, when my wife was pregnant with the kids. I loved slow pitch softball. I loved golfing, and I loved fishing. And she said, okay, ding dong, you get to pick one. And I said, okay. I sat back. I probably opened a cold beverage and thought about which one I was going to pick. And I picked fishing, thinking it's cheaper. That was not right. But now, so I kind of put the clubs away for a number of years, would golf in those one or two charity events every summer, but didn't really golf. But now my son's getting into it. My daughter's kind of getting into it. So we're starting to hit the links. We go out and golf 9 on a weekday during the summer. And I definitely golfed a lot more this year than I had in the past. So it's getting better, but it's not, I'm a lefty, so I'm not quite Phil Mickelson, but maybe by the end of next summer.
Maybe. It's what we aspire for. Final question, brought to you as always by our good friends at Waggle Golf. First, make sure you head over to getyourwaggleon.com, throw in promo code SP10 to take 10% off your entire order. Who would round out your dream golf foursome? So 3 guys you want to take out on the course. I don't care, dead or alive. We've had someone throw out a fictional character. It could be an athlete, celebrity. Who do we got?
Oh, man. I'll stick to hockey. Okay. I'm going to go Gretzky, Dino Ciccarelli.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, man. I got one more. Yeah, that's tough. I'd say Basil McRae.
Wow, some former Lightning players there. How about that?
Wow, North Stars. Joe.
Well, yeah, true. But yeah, both of
Yeah.
them. Yeah. I was in Tampa, I remember a year, so they both were, Tampa guys. But
Yeah,
up the page there. So
yeah, I was a huge North Stars fan growing up. Love the North Stars.
Got to be surreal being part of the new North Stars or the new North Stars 2.0.
I have a dream job for sure. This has been the last 5+ years of 6 years, I guess, as a player, 6+ years have been fantastic.
And guys you played with on the Wild team are still on the team, so
I can believe it.
It's
crazy, huh? No, it's great. I love it. It's one of my favorite things every day when I get to go into the rink and I get to see the players or the office staff or the coaches. And yeah, I thoroughly enjoy it. I'm really fortunate to be able to do this for a living.
Well, we enjoyed having you on. Thank you so much for taking the time and kicking off the Iowa season here. And we'll hopefully have you on mid-season or second half of the year when things are going, and probably might be a lot of new call-ups in that particular point. Guys, we can talk about that NHL level. But thanks so much, Matt. Appreciate it.
For sure, Joe. Scott, thanks for having me, guys. I appreciate it.
No problem.
Interesting guy, interesting background. I know you hit on it a ton in the interview there, Joe, just like tying in like, hey, everything you went through, how do we translate that to how these prospects work? But I don't know, it very early, and it's like obviously hard to really judge what's going on at the AHL level if you're not like really close to it, because a lot of it's controlled by what is and isn't happening in the NHL. But how do we feel with Matt Hendricks at the helm?
Well, I mean, I think he's a guy, like you said, with experience of being a player in the bubble, a guy who's been fight for his spot in the NHL. Like he said in his interview about deciding whether to go to Europe or to continue his NHL dream to play. So he can identify with guys who are on the fringe. He can identify with guys who played in the NHL for a number of years. So I think having that kind of fresher perspective, he's played with Brody, he's played with Spurgeon, he's played with a lot of these guys on the current team as well. Relatively young guy. So I think they needed a little bit of a change over in Iowa. Brett McLean came over last year as a head coach and had to kind of start reestablish a culture there. And they had a lot of things out of their circumstances with the injuries and guys that were supposed to be their veteran players called up for most of the year, and they tried to fix that this summer in free agency and bringing in guys on free agent contracts that can be there more regularly, is to be kind of give them some stabilizing forces for the Hunter Hates, of the world. So I think, having his experience, and this is a new experience for him as the first year GM of a professional hockey club. But I think he has a lot of the firsthand experience as a player and growing and development scene to kind of have a good pulse for what should happen. And it's a very important time for the Wild prospects, right? It's supposed to be that kind of second part of their plan, or part of the 5-year plan, is having these wave of prospects to join the group. So really enjoyed his conversation and seeing where they go.
Absolutely. And then we've got to talk, at least quick before we get into Keyboard Warriors, about your Minnesota Golden Gophers taking care of business, sweeping, arguably dismantling minus like one period, the Duluth Bulldogs. Honestly, the only takeaway that I even care to talk about, Joe, is this line, which, Motzko's not labeling lines. We'll call it second line, probably, I would believe. Our prospect here for the Wild, Jimmy Clark, centering Connor Kurth, draft pick of Tampa Bay Lightning. Mm-hmm. And then, of course, we've got Matthew Wood, who just came over in the transfer portal this year, first round pick of the Nashville Predators. This line is doing everything we could have hoped and more. It's I never expected the three of these guys to end up on a line together. It was a very weird Frankenstein line. And now I'm ready to get very upset if Motzko splits them up, because it's awesome.
Well, now you're creating different nicknames for him, right? I get inside your head, you got to have something going on for that. But to have those guys clicking and then have Snuggerud and Oliver Moore on the line, there's a reason why they're so optimistic about this team this year. And it's very clear in the beginning part of the season, you have teams like Minnesota, DU, BU, BC, are teams that people are predicting to be in Frozen Four in St. Louis, but long way to go for that. But a lot of reason to believe, early season, a lot of reason to believe that the Gophers have a really good chance this year.
Yeah, and as of now, they're sitting at 5th in the rankings via coach poll, but second, tied with Denver for second best odds to win the national championship this year. Plus 800 behind BC with plus 500. The other thing that's maybe worth talking about that I don't think we can overly assess yet is the goalie battle, which both largely looked pretty similar, minus that third period for the Friday night matchup. And we're not going to put all of that on Airy. There was definitely some breakdowns and lapses because the team got a little comfortable and they learned from it and bounced back in a great Saturday game. But Sawyer definitely looked the part. Again, Airy for the most part was good too. Far from that being the spot where Motzko is going to name his actual starter. But good now to actually see both of them play against the same competition for the first time.
Yeah, and it only get better competition as the season goes on. You get into conference play and everything like that. But they've been so kind of spoiled with their goaltending the last number of years, a guy you can just go to every night. And I think this kind of feeds the competition of who's the best one, who's going to grab the net, who's going to grab it and say, this is mine, I'm your guy. And so this is a great situation for them to have of two really good options versus having the one that they've had. Close came out of nowhere too. He was not a bona fide number one prospect coming into Minnesota. He came in there and saved their bacon and became a backstop for them for a few years there. So I think this is going to be new territory, which is why Motzko went into the transfer portal to get a better look there. And yeah, let it play out. There's such a long season. They're going to be in it no matter what until tournament time. So why not see both of them get battle tested and what happens?
Yeah, and the good news is early on, again, very early, neither of them scare me. And that's the biggest thing. As long as we don't have a goalie that is going to go out there and lose us games,
yeah,
we're we're sitting okay. But yeah, there's a quick Gopher roundup. But this weekend, St. Thomas becoming potentially their biggest rival as things continue to build here. Home game, Mariucci on Friday, Saturday at the X. I'm sure people already have tickets, but if not, I know there's still some available. Joe, last segment here to round out the show. As always, Keyboard Warriors weekly hot take segment brought to you by our great friends at Barrel Theory Beer Company. This whole episode, I've been sipping on a delicious IPA called Lost in Translation. Nice little autumn leaves. Beautiful. But make sure whenever I guess it's another like 2 weeks here, Joe, that we're going to have to wait for the Wild to be back here. But get them again. It's sections 105, 112, 217, and club level 36. If you're going to the Wild games, but also this Thursday, Viking game against the Los Angeles Rams. They will be hosting a full viewing party. They do have some beer discounts. There's going to be food options. Get out there if you don't have anything else planned. Highly recommend. Joe, got 3 hot takes here. First one is from me, and this isn't like a scorching hot take, but it is definitely a little bit of a push. Kirill Kaprizov, power play goals, currently sits tied for third Minnesota Wild history with 59. Zach Parise sitting at the lead with 69. I think it's just one away from Mikko Koivu, who's in second with 60. Past couple of years, Kaprizov has averaged about a goal or a power play goal every 4 games. We got 32 games left now after this Florida game is over. He needs 11 points, which is a little over a goal every 3 games pace. Yeah. And that's to round out the 2024 calendar year. I'm saying this power play catches fire and he's the one leading it, and he's going to break that record for the franchise before we hit the year 2025.
That's very doable. I mean, with the way these are going right now with him and Zuccarello and Boldy on that, I mean...
Only one so far this year, though.
Yeah. I mean, I think the capability of that group, he can do it. I mean, he'll obviously be the all-time leader in power play goals by the time he's in.
Yeah, this season that's happening.
This season, yeah.
That's why, like, I had to set something that was a little bit of a stretch to attain. Like, if he continues at his normal pace, he'll still be like 4 goals short come the new year. But hey, had to throw something in there Wild related because my other 2 are not Minnesota Wild related.
Are they Gopher related or are they Halloween related?
Nope, they are both basketball related, weirdly.
Okay.
So the first one is coming from your colleague, Michael Russo. Okay. Who retweeted a post from the WNBA, which he eventually posted the screenshot thereafter when they deleted it because, wow, they really fumbled this. But Russo quote tweets and says, admirable, I suppose. The WNBA and its commish are not even trying to hide what it so wanted. Imagine another commissioner wearing a skyline of one of the 2 teams and another league tweeting the trophy is, quote unquote, where it belongs. From the officiating to the aftermath, amateur hour. Joe, what do you think of this hot take from Michael Russo?
He went a little further than I would have gone in that one. But watching that whole thing unfold, like, I'm sure is wearing a skyline of the fucking New York City, right? Wasn't she? Like,
she was wearing the New York City skyline. And again, people, you need to understand the WNBA Twitter account posted that the trophy is where it belongs. What are you doing, WNBA? Like, don't get me wrong. It's not nearly as bad as, what happened last year with, former guest of the show, Natalie Darwitz. We don't need to resurface any of that, but like, this is insane. And granted, Joe, I know that you're going to be more reserved than me and Russo on most occasions, but like, I'm totally with Russo. Like, this is exactly how I would approach something like this. It was blatant and in your face. Like, there was no sugarcoating. They weren't like beating around the bush. Like, this was just so blatant. And I don't know. That was
Well,
pretty wild.
The call at the end, especially on Steer, like wasn't the traveling wasn't called, and I applaud Blink's head coach for being like, find me whatever. Like they stole that shit from us, and look at the free throws that were called. It was just
bad.
It's the sport's still battling. Like even though they've had such great players and ambassadors for the sport for so long, they're still battling to make money and do all that and to be able to stick around, and for that to be the storyline of this incredible season of all this talent that they've had, including Caitlin Clark coming in and Angel Reese and all that stuff. Like to have this be the storyline of their season right now, it's just crap, right? And this is not just if there was other team in there. Was it like the Detroit Shock or whatever the team was involved in? It doesn't have to be the Minnesota Lynx. It was a bad look for a league that's tried to establish themselves with legitimacy over a number of years, and they've had
the league that had a great season by and large. Like, this is a big growth year for them, and then to do that is just weird,
unnecessary,
not wild.
Not wild, weird.
Okay, there's Russo on the Lynx. Last one here, I guess it is hockey, but a little bit more of an NBA focus for me. A lot of people getting up in arms about this NHL Frozen Frenzy being the same night as the NBA season opener. I gotta wonder, though, who was first? Who set up their schedule and was established first? Because, I mean, with the NHL season starting first, I got to imagine that they had their season locked in first. So is this the NBA coming in and trying to cuck the NHL and be like, oh, you want to have a big night with everybody tuning in? Guess again, because we got the pull. Or is this the NHL being like, you know what? We like that this is the NBA opener, and we're just going to like basically put a monopoly on all ESPN channels.
I don't know on the planning circus what this happened, but like I don't think the NBA was worried with NHL in any stretch in their imagination. But yeah, like I like the idea of the Frozen Frenzy. I like the idea of having this kind of push for all the games every night, whatever. But yeah, I don't think the NBA was like shaking their boots about NHL having one night where they had all their games being played.
See, that's my hot take is they kind of came in like, oh, you want to have a big night? Okay. We'll come in. We'll disrupt it a little bit.
We'll just have LeBron play it. No one will watch it. Anyone else, or we'll have it, it just.
Yeah, let's watch LeBron and his kid, who absolutely is good enough to play in the NBA without LeBron on the team.
They see the commercial, the one where he put all this stuff, like the cereal in his car.
No, I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, it was like LeBron and goes in like the driveway and he pours all this cereal in his son's car and like it's all filled with like Fruity Pebbles or something like that, whatever like that. And so like all of a sudden Bronny comes out and like, oh man, got pranked, and then like LeBron's in the backseat of like a nice SUV like that, like, oh, don't be late for practice, man, blah blah blah. Clean my driveway while you're at, like, and so just I don't know.
Now the way they could have made that even better is LeBron shows up to the arena or whatever you call it for basketball, and Marc-Andre Fleury messed with something of his.
That'd be good. A little cross promo. Yeah.
Not weird. Wild.
Wow. They need some cross promo between the two. If they're gonna have both leagues, that's gotta get them involved. Both of them.
Yeah. Oh man. But great. That's what we got then. That is the end of the hot takes. Again, everyone go check out Barrel Theory, whether it's for the Vikings game, whether it's grabbing their offering at the next Wild game, or if you're going out to trample by turtles like Joe, pop in there beforehand. Great spot. And it's like a 15-minute walk, if that, to get from their tap room to the X. Do it. Joe, anything you know of that's in the works from Russo besides his gamers and previews? Anything big in the works from the two of you for The Athletic?
Well, I do know that he worked on a project with our group, ranking all the NHL front offices, and they talked to 40 league executives, from GMs, assistant GMs, scouting directors, all you name it, collaboration with some of our writers, and broke down that. And you would read that. It was probably, it could come out today on The Athletic, but Mike was a big part of that. See where the Wild ranked in that one. Predictable names at the top, of course, teams that won the Cup in recent years, aka Florida, aka Tampa, stuff like that.
Basically, name any team that is in a no income tax state, and you got the GMs that led it.
Well, there's a team that hasn't won a Cup since '99, who was number one. So
weird. No income tax.
Okay.
I also agree.
They've been really good.
They've been great.
Really, really well. But yes, that's a really good story out there. And he's in the road trip, obviously in Florida and Tampa coming up, and 12-day road trip. Crazy. But yeah, a lot of coverage there from my colleague Mike, and then I will be back here eventually writing some more stuff with some projects that I've been working on that were delayed due to the Believe, but I will be right back on it relatively soon. Network.
There we go. Well, that does it then for this episode. Again, anyone that is willing to subscribe, 5-star review for the podcast, Fellowship of the Rink. If you're into the video stuff, head over to YouTube, subscribe to the Soda Pod. And pretty soon here, as soon as I can come up for air, we're actually going to be throwing some stuff up on Instagram too for all the sickos out there who are more into pictures. So be on the lookout. We'll be there soon, but really appreciate all of you tuning in this week, as always, for Fellowship of the Rink. You stay classy, stay to hockey.